The jack-o'-lantern looks innocent, a festive decoration signaling you're participating in the holiday fun. You've carved them, you've lit them, you've placed them on your porch every October 31st. Smiling faces, triangular eyes, a cheerful little candle flickering inside. But that sanitized image is a lie constructed over a century of deliberate forgetting. The popular story about Stingy Jack, the clever Irishman who tricked the devil, is incomplete. The parts they leave out are the parts that matter. The true origin of the jack-o'-lantern is a lesson in celestial exile. It's about what happens when you belong nowhere, not in heaven, not in hell, not anywhere in the cosmic order. It's about eternal wandering with no hope of rest, no possibility of redemption, and no end to suffering. The jack-o'-lantern isn't decoration. It's a warning carved into vegetable flesh, a reminder of the ultimate penalty for spiritual negligence. Tonight, we're telling the complete, unedited legend of Stingy Jack, not the sanitized children's version, but the full Irish folktale with all its theological implications intact. We'll examine exactly what Jack did to earn his fate, why neither heaven nor hell would accept him, and what the coal ember truly represents. We're revealing Halloween's darkest secret and the real purpose of that light inside the pumpkin. It serves two functions, and only one is about helping Jack see in the darkness. The other connects directly to Samhain and the dangerous dead who wander when the veil collapses. The jack-o'-lantern embodies Samhain's darkest fear, cosmic exile, the terror of becoming a spirit with no place, no purpose, and no hope of ever finding either. By the end of this video, you'll never look at a carved pumpkin the same way again. Let's begin with the man himself, Stingy Jack. The legend originates in the 18th century Ireland, though oral traditions suggest the story is considerably older. It centers on a man known as Stingy Jack. Not jack-o'-lantern yet, just Jack. And stingy wasn't affectionate. It described his essential nature. Jack's occupation varies by telling: blacksmith, farmer, village drunk. But his defining trait transcended profession. Jack was clever, amoral, and fundamentally cruel. He cheated everyone he encountered. He lied reflexively. He stole without remorse. He broke promises as easily as breathing. But the Irish folk tradition is brutally specific about Jack's true failing. He wasn't a lovable rogue forced into wickedness by poverty. Jack had means. He chose greed and cruelty because they satisfied him. He was stingy not from necessity, but from a pathological refusal to share, to give, to show any generosity toward anyone. Most critically, and this spiritual flaw seals his fate, Jack had no piety whatsoever. He didn't pray. He didn't attend Mass. He didn't perform the sacraments or observe holy days. He maintained no relationship with God, harbored no fear of divine judgment, showed no concern for his immortal soul. This wasn't philosophical atheism. This was spiritual negligence. In Irish Catholic culture, even the worst sinners maintained outward religious observance. They confessed periodically. They received the Eucharist on major feast days. They performed the bare minimum to acknowledge the sacred order. Jack refused even this. He was spiritually indifferent, spiritually lazy, spiritually neutral. He lived as though the afterlife didn't exist, as though cosmic accounting didn't matter, as though he could simply exist without spiritual consequence. This matters. It's why what happens to him is so severe. One night, placed on or near Samhain in most versions, Jack was drinking at a tavern. He'd been there for hours, accumulating debts he had no intention of paying. The tavern keeper grew anxious. Jack showed no signs of settling his account. Then the devil appeared. Whether summoned by Jack's wickedness or simply passing through to collect an obviously damned soul, the devil approached Jack and informed him his time was finished. Jack's soul belonged in hell, and payment was due. Jack was drunk, but not stupid. Unwilling to accept his fate, he looked for an angle. "Before we go," Jack proposed, "grant me one last drink, for old time's sake. Just one, then I'll come peacefully." The The devil, either amused by Jack's audacity or confident in his inevitable victory, agreed. Then Jack revealed his play. "I don't have money to pay for the drinks. Could you help?" The devil, demonstrating either arrogance or curiosity about Jack's scheme, agreed to transform himself into a silver sixpence that Jack could use to pay the tavern keeper. The moment the devil transformed, Jack moved. He snatched the coin and shoved it into his pocket, the same pocket where he kept a small silver cross. The cross was crucial. In Irish Catholic folk belief, the devil couldn't maintain transformed state in the presence of holy symbols. He was trapped, bound in coin form, unable to change back, powerless against the consecrated silver pressed against him. The devil raged and threatened, but Jack held the advantage. Jack made his demand. "Promise you won't take my soul for 1 year. Give me 1 more year of life, and I'll release you." The devil had no choice. He agreed. 1 year. In folk tradition, the devil's word, once given, was absolutely binding. It was one of the few immutable rules governing him, a strange honor among the utterly dishonorable. Jack removed the cross. The devil transformed back, furious but bound by his promise. He vanished. Jack returned to his drinking, pleased with himself. He'd cheated death, or rather hell, for another year. But Jack didn't use that year to repent. He didn't reform. He didn't start attending Mass or confessing his sins. He didn't change a single aspect of how he lived. He simply kept being Jack. Stingy, cruel, amoral, spiritually indifferent. The year passed. 1 year later, almost to the day, the devil returned. Again, the timing fell near Samhain, when the veil thinned and supernatural encounters intensified. The devil found Jack walking along a country road at night. This time, he took no chances, no taverns, no drinks, no opportunities for tricks. "Your year is finished," the devil said. "Time to go." Jack, still unwilling to accept his fate, scanned his surroundings desperately. He spotted an apple tree nearby, heavy with fruit. "Wait," Jack said. "Before we go, could you get me an apple from that tree? I'd like one last taste of earthly pleasure before eternal damnation." It was absurd. The devil should have refused immediately, but pride overwhelmed caution. He wanted to demonstrate that Jack's first trick had been a fluke, that he remained in control. The devil climbed the tree. The moment the devil reached the branches, Jack pulled out his knife and carved crosses into the tree trunk. Multiple crosses, encircling the base completely. The devil was trapped again. He couldn't climb down past the holy symbols. He couldn't transform and escape. He was stuck in the tree, powerless, humiliated a second time by this drunken, clever mortal. The devil's rage was apocalyptic. He screamed threats and promised elaborate tortures. But he was trapped. This time, Jack made a larger demand. "Promise you'll never take my soul. Not in a year, not in 10 years, not ever. Leave me alone for the rest of my natural life. And when I die, you won't claim me. Promise this, and I'll release you." The devil had no choice. He gave his word. He would never take Jack's soul, never claim him for hell, never touch him for eternity. Jack carved away enough crosses for the devil to descend. The devil vanished immediately, humiliated but bound by his promise. Jack had done it. He'd secured eternal protection from hell. He'd outsmarted the devil twice. He was safe from damnation. Or so he believed. Jack failed to understand a critical theological principle. Securing protection from hell didn't automatically grant entry to heaven. These were separate judgments governed by separate criteria. He'd focused entirely on avoiding punishment, never considering what he needed to do to earn reward. He'd spent his life being wicked, cruel, and spiritually negligent. He'd performed no good works. He'd shown no charity. He'd demonstrated no faith. He'd never repented, never confessed, never sought reconciliation with God. And even after securing his safety from hell, Jack still didn't change. He still didn't repent. He'd secured protection and considered that sufficient. He went back to his old life, his old habits, his old wickedness. He thought cleverness could substitute for virtue. He thought he'd beaten the cosmic system. He was catastrophically wrong. Eventually, Jack died. The exact circumstances don't matter. Old age, accident, disease. What matters is what happened next. Jack's soul left his body and began the journey every soul must make, to judgment, to accounting, to its eternal destination. He approached heaven's gates first. This wasn't presumption, it was procedure. All souls face judgment. Even Jack got his evaluation. St. Peter met him at the gates and reviewed Jack's life. The record was damning. A lifetime of cruelty, greed, and wickedness. No charity, no kindness, no faith, no repentance, no good works, nothing justifying entry to paradise. "You can't enter," Peter said. "You've done nothing to earn it. You've lived for yourself alone, shown no love for God or man. Heaven isn't for you." Jack was shocked. He'd been so focused on avoiding hell that he'd never seriously considered rejection from heaven. But the judgment was final. The gates closed. No anger, no drama, just factual exclusion. "You don't belong here. Go." Jack descended to hell and knocked at the gates. He presented himself, ready to accept punishment if heaven wouldn't have him. Better eternal torment than eternal wandering. The devil appeared, and this was the moment Jack realized the full scope of his mistake. "You can't come in," the devil said. "But I'm damned," Jack protested. "Heaven rejected me. Where else can I go?" "Nowhere," the devil replied. "I gave you my word. I promised I would never take your soul. That promise is binding. I can't break it even if I wanted to, and I don't want to. You humiliated me twice. You trapped me, tricked me, made me look foolish. You think I'm going to grant you the mercy of a place in hell? You think I'm going to give you the relief of eternal punishment rather than eternal uncertainty?" The devil's logic was brutal and perfectly clear. Hell wasn't merely punishment. It was a place. It was structure, hierarchy, purpose. Even the damned had roles in the cosmic order. They were punished, but they belonged somewhere. They served a function. Jack had rejected heaven through his actions and locked himself out of hell through his cleverness. He belonged nowhere. He fit into no category. He was cosmically homeless. "You're caught between," the devil said. "You have no place in the afterlife. You'll wander forever in the darkness, with no destination, no purpose, no hope of rest." This was worse than hell. This was cosmic exile. This was ultimate abandonment. Jack panicked, realizing the full horror of his situation. But how will I see? How will I find my way in the darkness? Even facing eternal wandering, Jack focused on practical concerns rather than spiritual ones. He wanted light to navigate by, not redemption to free him. The devil, in a final moment of contemptuous mercy, reached into hell's fires and pulled out a burning coal, a hot ember glowing red. "Here," the devil said, tossing it to Jack. "This will light your way." "It's all you're getting from me." The coal came from hell itself, so it would never burn out. It would glow eternally, matching Jack's sentence. It was simultaneously gift and curse, light enough to see by, but a constant reminder of what he could have had if he'd chosen differently. Jack caught the ember but faced an immediate problem. It was burning hot. He couldn't carry it in his hands. He found a turnip growing nearby. Irish and Scottish turnips were large, hard rutabagas, sometimes growing to the size of a human head. Jack carved out the center, hollowing it into a makeshift lantern, and placed the coal inside. The turnip had natural holes and irregularities that let the light shine through and allowed air to feed the ember. In some versions, Jack deliberately carved crude eyes and a mouth, not for decoration, but for function. And then he began walking. walking into the darkness, walking between heaven and hell, walking forever. The Irish called him Jack of the Lantern, Jack o' Lantern, the man with the light, wandering eternally in the darkness, belonging nowhere, welcomed nowhere, able to rest nowhere. Jack became more than a story. He became a warning, a cautionary tale told on dark nights, especially around Samhain when the veil thinned and spirits walked. Parents told children about Stingy Jack. See what happens when you're greedy? See what happens when you neglect your soul? See what happens when you think you can outsmart the cosmic order? But the legend served another crucial function, one that connected directly to ancient Samhain fears and the understanding of dangerous spirits. Jack wasn't the only one wandering. He was simply the most famous example. The folk tradition understood that many souls were caught between those who died without last rites, those who died violently and unexpectedly, those who died with unfinished business or unresolved guilt, those who died in states of sin without confession. These wandering spirits were dangerous. They were confused, angry, desperate. They would attach to the living if they could, haunt households, bring misfortune, even attempt possession. And they were especially active during Samhain, when the veil collapsed and the dead could cross freely. The jack-o'-lantern became a ward against them, a symbol of one of their own, placed at doorways and windows to tell other wandering spirits, "This house understands you. This house respects the danger you represent. Stay away." In Ireland and Scotland from the 18th century onward, and likely earlier through oral tradition, families carved turnips or large potatoes into lanterns for Halloween. These weren't the small white turnips found in modern supermarkets. These were rutabagas, large and dense, sometimes weighing several pounds, perfect for holding candles or embers. The carving was deliberate and symbolic. The faces weren't friendly or welcoming. They were grotesque, frightening, meant to ward off evil rather than invite it. Jagged teeth, hollow, threatening eyes, expressions of suffering or rage. These weren't decorations. These were protective talismans, spiritual weapons placed at thresholds to guard the household during the most dangerous night of the year. The custom served two distinct functions, both critical to understanding what the jack-o'-lantern truly represents. The first function was commemorative and self-reflective. By creating a carved turnip with a light inside, families symbolically acknowledged Jack's eternal wandering. They provided light for his journey, even though their small candle couldn't actually help him. This might seem pointless. Why help someone being punished for wickedness? But the folk tradition understood something profound. Jack's punishment, while deserved, was terrifying. It represented the worst possible fate. Not torment, but abandonment. Not hell, but nowhere. By lighting a lantern for Jack, families expressed their own fear of that fate. They performed a small act of mercy toward a damned soul, demonstrating that they, unlike Jack, were capable of mercy. That they, unlike Jack, weren't spiritually indifferent. It was a reminder to themselves, don't be like Jack, don't neglect your soul. Don't think cleverness can substitute for virtue. Don't delay repentance until it's too late. Every time someone entered or left the house, they saw that carved face with its internal light. A constant reminder to tend to spiritual matters, to maintain proper religious observance, to avoid ending up like Jack, wandering, homeless, belonging nowhere, exiled from cosmic order entirely. The second function was immediately practical. The jack-o'-lantern actively warded off other wandering spirits during Samhain. As we've discussed in previous videos, Samhain was when the veil between worlds collapsed completely. Not just benevolent ancestors crossed over, but all dead, including those who died violently, died without proper rites, died with unfinished business, died in states of sin. These spirits were unmoored, dangerous, desperate for connection to the living world. They would seek entry to warm houses, living bodies, any anchor in the material realm. They could cause illness, bring misfortune, or even temporarily possess the unwary. The jack-o'-lantern warned them away through multiple mechanisms. First, it demonstrated knowledge. The carved face said, "This household understands what walks tonight. We're not naive about Samhain. We've taken precautions. We know the old ways." Second, it showed compliance. The light represented offerings made, awareness maintained, obligations fulfilled. This household had already honored the dead properly. The dangerous spirits should move on. Third, and most powerfully, it presented a symbol of one of their own. Jack-o'-lantern was a wandering spirit himself, condemned to eternal exile. By displaying his likeness, the household essentially said, "We understand cosmic exile. We know about wandering souls. We're protected by that understanding. This territory is warded. Find another house." The grotesque face wasn't meant to be welcoming. It was meant to be intimidating to other spirits. It said, "Something fierce guards this threshold. Something that understands the darkness you come from. Something that can recognize and repel you. Stay away." The light inside the jack-o'-lantern served both functions simultaneously, and this duality is essential to understanding the symbol's power. For Jack, and symbolically, for the household's spiritual awareness, the light represented eternal wandering and eternal punishment. It was the ember from hell that never burned out, constantly reminding Jack of his fate, constantly illuminating the fact that he belonged nowhere and would wander forever. It was a curse disguised as a gift, providing just enough light to see the endless road ahead, but never enough to reach any destination. For the dangerous dead, the light represented vigilance. It said, "This household is awake. This household is watching. This household has taken precautions. The light isn't welcoming you. It's watching for you. It's a beacon of deterrence, not invitation. It's a flame that burns to keep you out, not to draw you in." The fact that the light came from inside the carved vessel mattered tremendously. It wasn't an external flame vulnerable to wind and chance. It was contained, controlled, deliberately placed. This represented mastery over the symbol, authority over the protective ritual. The household controlled the light, therefore controlled the protection it offered. The practice varied across Ireland and Scotland. Some regions carved turnips exclusively. Others used large potatoes, beets, or mangel-wurzels. The specific vegetable mattered less than the act itself, creating a vessel for light that symbolized both Jack's wandering and protective warding. Wealthier families sometimes created multiple lanterns, placing them at every entrance, doors, windows, even along paths leading to the house. Poorer families created a single, carefully carved lantern that served as the household's primary protection. The timing was specific and non-negotiable. Lanterns were carved and lit on October 31st, Samhain night, when the danger was greatest. They stayed lit through the night until dawn, when the veil would restore itself and the dead would retreat to their proper realm. In the morning, the lanterns were often destroyed or buried rather than kept. They'd served their purpose for that year's Samhain. Keeping them longer risked attracting the very spirits they were meant to repel. A ward left in place too long could become a beacon, drawing danger rather than repelling it. Some families developed elaborate rituals around the carving. The head of household would carve the face while reciting prayers or protective charms. The first lighting of the candle was sometimes accompanied by invocations to saints or direct addresses to Jack himself, acknowledging his fate and asking that the household be spared similar exile. These weren't empty superstitions. These were serious protective rituals performed by people who genuinely believed that supernatural danger was real, immediate, and potentially deadly. The jack-o'-lantern was spiritual technology, a practical tool for managing metaphysical threats during the one night of the year when those threats were most active. The jack-o'-lantern tradition remained relatively localized to Ireland and Scotland until the mid-19th century. It was a folk practice passed down through families, tied specifically to Celtic traditions and Samhain observance. Then came the Great Famine. Starting in 1845, potato blight devastated Ireland. Over 1 million people died. Another million emigrated. many to North America, bringing their traditions with them. When Irish and Scottish immigrants arrived in America, they encountered a practical problem. Turnips and rutabagas weren't as readily available or as large as they'd been in the old country. American turnips were smaller, harder to find, less suitable for carving substantial lanterns. But America had pumpkins. Native to North America, cultivated extensively by indigenous peoples and adopted enthusiastically by colonial farmers, pumpkins were abundant every autumn. And they were perfect for the tradition. Pumpkins were enormous compared to turnips, some varieties growing to 50 pounds or more. They were easy to carve with soft flesh that could be scooped out quickly. They had thick walls ideal for holding candles safely. And they were cheap, available at every farm and market in October. The shift from turnip to pumpkin happened within a single generation. By the 1870s and 1880s, Irish-American families were carving pumpkins instead of turnips, maintaining the tradition, but adapting it to New World resources. But the shift wasn't merely practical. It was symbolically significant, and the symbolism altered the meaning in subtle but important ways. The turnip was Old World. It was connected to specific Celtic traditions, specific Irish and Scottish folklore, specific understandings of Samhain and the dangerous dead. It was hard, dense, requiring effort and intention to carve. The difficulty of the task reinforced the seriousness of the ritual. The pumpkin was New World. It was easier, more accessible, more visually impressive. It was a harvest symbol in American agricultural tradition, representing autumn abundance rather than warding and protection. The ease of carving meant the ritual became less specialized, less connected to families who understood the original meaning. With broader participation came diluted meaning. When only families with direct knowledge of the legend and the protective function carved turnips, the ritual maintained its spiritual significance. When anyone could easily carve a pumpkin, the activity became democratized, which sounds positive but actually weakened the tradition's power. The pumpkin's association with harvest celebration rather than spiritual protection meant it carried different symbolic weight. Americans began to see carved pumpkins as festive autumn decorations rather than protective wards against dangerous spirits. The context shifted from sacred to secular, from protection to presentation. By the early 20th century, Halloween was becoming commercialized in America. What had been primarily an immigrant folk tradition was being repackaged and sold as a general autumn celebration accessible to all Americans, regardless of ethnic background. Greeting card companies started producing Halloween cards in the 1900s, featuring cheerful pumpkins and friendly ghosts. Costume manufacturers began mass-producing Halloween costumes by the 1930s. Candy companies promoted trick-or-treating heavily starting in the 1950s, seeing an opportunity to sell massive quantities of sweets. The jack-o'-lantern was central to this commercialization. It was visual, distinctive, easy to reproduce on cards and decorations. Companies printed smiling pumpkins on everything: advertisements, party supplies, candy wrappers, store displays. The faces changed dramatically. They became friendly, cute, non-threatening. Instead of grotesque wards meant to frighten away malevolent spirits, they became cheerful harvest symbols. The jagged teeth became smiling mouths. The hollow, frightening eyes became friendly triangles. The expressions of suffering became expressions of joy. The meaning shifted comprehensively, from protection to decoration, from warding to welcoming, from sacred to secular, from serious spiritual work to harmless children's craft. By mid-century, most Americans who carved pumpkins had no idea why they were doing it. They didn't know about Stingy Jack or cosmic exile. They didn't know about Samhain or the dangerous dead or the need for protective wards. They didn't understand the theological implications or the folk traditions. They just knew it was something you did at Halloween, a fun, seasonal activity, a festive craft project, something to do with kids on a Saturday afternoon in October, like decorating Christmas cookies or coloring Easter eggs. The light inside changed meaning entirely. Originally, it represented Jack's eternal ember from hell, a reminder of punishment, exile, and the consequences of spiritual negligence. It represented the household's vigilance during the most dangerous night of the year. Now it was just atmospheric, spooky but not scary. A glowing decoration that looked nice on a porch, created ambiance for trick-or-treaters, contributed to the festive Halloween aesthetic. The theological implications vanished completely. What's fascinating, and somewhat eerie, is that the structure of the ritual survived even when the meaning died completely. Americans continued performing the essential elements without understanding why. They still carved faces into pumpkins. They still put lights inside. They still placed the pumpkins on thresholds, doorways, porches, windows. The pumpkin still sat at the boundary between inside and outside, private and public, household and world. The light still flickered from within. The face still stared outward into the darkness. Without intending to, without understanding why, Americans continued performing a protective ward ritual their ancestors had brought from Ireland and Scotland. They thought they were simply decorating for a fun holiday. The ritual structure persisted because it addressed a psychological need that didn't disappear just because the conscious meaning was forgotten. The human need to mark boundaries, to create protective symbols, to acknowledge the threshold between safety and danger. These needs don't vanish because we stop believing in wandering spirits. The jack-o'-lantern continued to function as a threshold marker, a boundary symbol, a statement of, "This is the edge of our household's protected space." The fact that people no longer consciously understood it as such didn't eliminate the psychological comfort it provided. Today, the jack-o'-lantern is ubiquitous, the primary symbol of Halloween, more recognizable than ghosts or witches or black cats. It appears on everything from coffee cups to corporate logos to emoji keyboards. The designs have become extraordinarily elaborate. People carve intricate scenes, famous faces, detailed artwork into their pumpkins. Competitions are held with cash prizes. Tutorials are published online. Specialized carving tools are manufactured and sold. It's become a form of temporary folk art, with the pumpkin as canvas and decay as medium. But this elaboration represents further distance from the original meaning. The more artistic and impressive the carving, the more it's about individual creativity and skill, and the less it's about spiritual protection or acknowledging cosmic exile. The grotesque, frightening faces that were meant to intimidate dangerous spirits have been replaced with movie characters, political figures, elaborate patterns, even corporate logos. The jack-o'-lantern has become a canvas for self-expression rather than a tool for spiritual protection. Yet underneath this modern elaboration, the essential structure remains: a carved face with light inside, placed at the threshold, watching outward into the darkness. The form persists even as the meaning is completely forgotten. Strip away the commercialization, the folk decoration, the children's craft projects. Examine the jack-o'-lantern for its core theological and cosmological meaning. The jack-o'-lantern is the physical embodiment of cosmic exile. It's the material representation of the worst possible fate, belonging nowhere, fitting into no category, having no place in the ordered structure of the afterlife. This is the Samhain fear made tangible, the terror that drove Druidic sacrifices, Roman expulsion rituals, and medieval Christian appropriations. The fear that death doesn't end things. The fear that you might not fit into whatever comes after. The fear that you could be stuck, trapped, wandering forever with no destination and no hope. Jack's punishment, rejection from both heaven and hell, represents a unique category of damnation. He's not in hell being tortured for his sins. He's not in purgatory working toward eventual redemption. He's not in heaven enjoying eternal reward. He's nowhere. He's between. He's exile personified. And the folk tradition understood this was worse than hell. Hell was at least a place with structure, hierarchy, and purpose. Even the damned belonged somewhere, served some function in the cosmic order. They had a role, even if that role was suffering. Jack has nothing, no place, no purpose, no community, no end, just wandering and darkness and the small, mocking ember reminding him eternally of what he could have had if he'd chosen differently. The legend functions as a warning against 3 specific failures, all cardinal sins in Irish Catholic folk tradition. Spiritual negligence. Jack's fundamental flaw wasn't dramatic, active evil. He wasn't a murderer or violent criminal. He was simply indifferent to his soul. He didn't pray, didn't repent, didn't perform the necessary spiritual maintenance everyone was expected to maintain. This resonated deeply in communities where religious observance was mandatory social practice. Not participating wasn't rebellion, it was negligence. And negligence of the soul was unforgivable because it suggested you simply didn't care about your eternal fate. Moral cowardice. Jack knew right from wrong. He was clever enough to trick the devil twice, but he chose wickedness anyway because it was easier, more profitable, more immediately gratifying. He had the capacity for virtue, but refused to exercise it. This made him worse than someone who committed evil without knowing better. Jack had knowledge and chose wrongly anyway. That was cowardice, the failure to act on moral knowledge when action required sacrifice or effort. Spiritual presumption. Jack wanted the benefits of virtue, avoiding hell, without performing the work of virtue. He wanted salvation through cleverness rather than righteousness. He thought he could game the system, find a loophole, secure a good outcome without actually being good. This was ultimate presumption, suggesting you could outsmart God, manipulate cosmic law, and cheat your way to paradise. The legend definitively answers that presumption. No, you can't. Cleverness without virtue earns you nothing. Protection from hell doesn't grant you entry to heaven. When families carved turnips and later pumpkins, they performed a multi-layered warning ritual. To themselves and their children, don't be like Jack. Don't neglect your soul. Don't think you can delay repentance indefinitely. The grotesque expression wasn't just meant to scare away spirits. It was meant to disturb the living, to make them uncomfortable, to remind them that spiritual negligence has consequences more terrifying than any punishment hell could devise. Simultaneously, the jack-o'-lantern functioned as active protection against spirits in the same condition as Jack, the dangerous, wandering dead of Samhain. The jack-o'-lantern warned them away. The light inside the jack-o'-lantern carries the deepest symbolism. It's simultaneously Jack's only possession and his eternal torment. The coal came from hell itself, a fragment of eternal fire, given in mockery by a devil who refused to grant even the mercy of damnation. The ember never dying also carried another message. Some consequences are eternal. Some choices can't be undone. Some fates can't be escaped. Jack's wandering will never end because he made choices that permanently excluded him from cosmic order. The eternal ember is a reminder that the afterlife isn't temporary, that spiritual consequences are permanent, that you can't negotiate your way out once judgment is passed. The jack-o'-lantern ties directly to everything we've explored in previous videos about Halloween's pagan origins. From the Celtic tradition came the terror of Samhain, when the veil collapsed and the dead walked freely. The jack-o'-lantern is the permanent symbol of what happens when you don't handle that transition properly. When you don't honor the dead correctly, when you don't perform the right rituals, when you don't maintain proper spiritual awareness, you risk becoming like Jack. The Celts understood that death was a threshold, a passage from one state to another. But they also understood that passage could go wrong. You could get stuck. You could end up caught between worlds, unable to move forward or go back. The jack-o'-lantern embodies that fear. It's what happens when the passage fails, when you become trapped in the liminal space between life and death, between heaven and hell, between order and chaos. From the Roman tradition came the Lemuria expulsion rituals, where householders actively drove out dangerous spirits through offerings and ritual authority. The jack-o'-lantern performs the same function. It's an active ward, not passive decoration. It drives away rather than attracts. It commands rather than invites. It says, "Stay out," with the authority of knowledge and preparation. From the church's appropriation came the transformation of pagan practices into Christian forms, while preserving the underlying structure. The jack-o'-lantern survived Christianization because it addressed a need the church couldn't fully satisfy: the need for practical, immediate protection against supernatural danger during the season when that danger felt most real. The church could offer theological assurances about salvation and damnation. It could provide sacraments and prayers, but it couldn't eliminate the visceral, psychological fear that something dangerous walked on Samhain night. The jack-o'-lantern provided tangible action, physical protection, and immediate comfort. It gave people something to do with their fear rather than just something to believe. There's a profound paradox at the heart of the jack-o'-lantern that makes it more powerful than most religious symbols. Jack is both the danger and the protection. He's what you fear becoming, but his image also protects you from other spirits in his condition. He's the warning and the ward simultaneously. This dual nature makes the jack-o'-lantern uniquely effective as both moral lesson and protective talisman. When you carve the face, you're acknowledging the reality of cosmic exile, that it exists, that it's possible, that it's a genuine fate that could befall anyone who makes Jack's mistakes. But by acknowledging it, by giving it physical form and placing it at your threshold, you're also claiming power over it. You're saying, I understand this danger, therefore I can protect against it. The symbol works because it doesn't pretend the danger isn't real. It doesn't offer empty reassurance that everything will be fine. It says, yes, cosmic exile is real. Yes, you could end up wandering forever. Yes, there are fates worse than hell. But knowledge is protection. Understanding is armor. If you acknowledge the danger and take precautions, you can guard against it. This is more honest than many religious symbols, which promise protection without acknowledging the full scope of spiritual danger. The jack-o'-lantern doesn't promise you'll be safe. It promises that if you're vigilant, if you tend to your soul, if you maintain spiritual awareness, you have a chance. The jack-o'-lantern legend raises uncomfortable theological questions that the church has never fully answered. If God is infinitely merciful, why is Jack condemned to eternal wandering rather than given another chance? If the devil can be tricked by a mortal man, what does that say about demonic power? If cleverness can secure protection from hell, why doesn't everyone just trick the devil instead of being good? The legend's answers to these questions reveal a darker, more complex theological vision than standard Christian doctrine typically presents. Divine mercy is available, but it must be sought. Jack never repented, never asked for forgiveness, never showed genuine contrition. He sought safety from consequences, not redemption from sin. God's mercy is infinite, but it's not automatic. You have to want it. You have to genuinely desire spiritual transformation, not just spiritual protection. Jack wanted a loophole, not salvation. He wanted to avoid punishment without becoming good. And the legend says definitively, that's not possible. Mercy is freely available to those who genuinely seek it, but it's not given to those who only want to avoid consequences while continuing in wickedness. This is a harsher vision than modern Christianity usually preaches, but it's more consistent with medieval Irish Catholicism, which emphasized works, penance, and genuine transformation rather than simple belief or asking for forgiveness. The legend reveals something interesting about hell's authority and limitations. The devil can be tricked. His word, once given, is binding even to him. He's powerful, but not omnipotent. Clever, but not infallible. This reflects folk Catholic theology more than official church doctrine. In folk tradition, the devil was dangerous but manageable if you knew the right prayers, the right symbols, the right tactics. He was a cosmic bureaucrat following rules, not an absolute force of chaos. But the legend also shows the limits of tricking the devil. Jack secured protection from hell, but that protection ultimately became part of his punishment. The devil's promise not to take Jack's soul meant Jack couldn't enter hell even when he wanted to. The trick turned into a trap. This suggests a deeper cosmic order that even the devil must obey. The rules aren't arbitrary, they're structural. They govern reality itself, and trying to manipulate those rules for personal advantage, as Jack did, inevitably backfires because you're not just tricking the devil. You're trying to game the fundamental structure of cosmic justice itself. The most theologically radical aspect of the jack-o'-lantern legend is its assertion that spaces exist between heaven and hell, where souls can be trapped. Official Catholic theology recognized purgatory, a temporary state of purification before entering heaven. But Jack isn't in purgatory. He's not working toward redemption. He's permanently trapped in a liminal space with no possibility of escape or improvement. This suggests a more complex afterlife geography than the simple heaven/hell binary. It suggests there are cracks in the cosmic order, spaces where souls can fall through and get stuck, regions that aren't officially part of any recognized theological category. This is closer to pagan conceptions of the afterlife, which recognized multiple destinations and possibilities. The Irish otherworld had many regions, some pleasant, some neutral, some terrible. Not everyone went to the same place. Your destination depended on how you died, what rituals were performed, what obligations you'd fulfilled in life. The jack-o'-lantern legend preserves this more complex, more unsettling vision. It says, the afterlife isn't simple. There aren't just two options. There are edge cases, exceptional situations, fates that don't fit the standard categories. And if you're not careful, you might end up in one of those cracks. Perhaps the most important theological lesson of the jack-o'-lantern legend is its condemnation of spiritual neutrality. Jack wasn't actively evil in a dramatic sense. He was passively evil, neglectful, indifferent, lazy about spiritual matters. He didn't reject God violently. He just didn't bother with God at all. He was spiritually neutral. And the legend says spiritual neutrality is unforgivable. It's worse than active wickedness, because active wickedness at least acknowledges the spiritual realm as real and important. The murderer who then repents has hope. But the person who simply doesn't care about spiritual matters at all, who treats the soul as irrelevant, who never bothers to engage with questions of meaning or purpose or cosmic justice, that person is lost. This resonates with the biblical warning about being lukewarm. Because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. Active evil can be confronted, addressed, repented. But indifference is harder to reach because it doesn't even acknowledge there's something to care about. Jack's fate is the fate of spiritual indifference, not punishment for caring about the wrong things, but exile for not caring about anything beyond immediate, selfish concerns. He never developed a spiritual life at all, never engaged with questions larger than his own comfort and safety. And when death came, he had nothing to offer, no spiritual substance to be judged. Heaven requires positive merit, works of charity, expressions of faith, genuine love for God and neighbor. Hell accepts negative merit, active wickedness, deliberate sin, chosen evil. But neutrality offers nothing to judge. It's not good enough for heaven and not bad enough for hell. It's simply nothing, empty, void. And the cosmic order apparently has no place for nothing. Jack is exiled not because he's too evil or not good enough, but because he's spiritually void. He's a spiritual null set, and the afterlife has no proper place for those who never developed souls worth judging. The jack-o'-lantern has survived every attempt to sanitize, commercialize, or strip it of meaning. The image persists. The ritual continues. Every October, millions of people carve faces into pumpkins, place lights inside, and set them at thresholds. They think they're participating in harmless seasonal fun. They don't realize they're performing a centuries-old protective ward ritual with roots in Irish folk Catholicism and deeper roots in Celtic Samhain traditions. The church tried to absorb this symbol, to reframe Jack as a simple moral lesson about sin and redemption. Commercial interests tried to transform it into cheerful autumn decoration. Modern culture has tried to reduce it to craft project and artistic expression. But the symbol survives because it addresses something fundamental in human psychology. The fear of exclusion, the fear of wandering, the fear of belonging nowhere. These are primal terrors that no amount of theological reassurance or commercial sanitization can eliminate. The structure remains. A carved face with light inside, watching outward into the darkness. The form persists, even when the meaning is forgotten. The jack-o'-lantern is the physical embodiment of Halloween's darkest truth. Death doesn't necessarily end your story, and the ending you get might be worse than anything you imagined. It's a reminder that spiritual negligence has consequences, that moral cowardice extracts costs, that you can't trick your way to salvation or game your way to paradise, that cleverness without virtue earns you nothing. And it's a warning to the living and to the dead. The church tried to steal this symbol and failed. It remains pagan at its core, even in its Christianized form, even in its commercialized modern version. Every carved pumpkin is a small rebellion against forgetting, a small persistence of old knowledge, a small reminder that Halloween is about something darker and deeper than candy and costumes. When you carve your pumpkin this October, you're participating in a ritual older and darker than you probably realize. The jack-o'-lantern grins out at the darkness with hollow eyes and flickering light, eternally wandering, eternally warning, eternally warding, just like Jack himself. This closes our examination of Halloween symbols, but one final deception remains: the institutional lie that allowed the church to steal the calendar itself and claim authority over the season of the dead. Next, we reveal the political maneuver that created All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, and why the church positioned them exactly when it did. Until then, keep questioning.